Mark Changizi here with your science moment. Hey Mark, you sound like, when you say that, you sound like Matthias Desmet. And I'm unsubscribing to your Substack. I got a message from a Substack subscriber saying exactly that. Now, this is a common theme in terms of there's a lot of anger, and I've talked about this before. Of course, the lockdowners have been extremely angry. They've graffitied my Wikipedia page 2.5 years ago because I was a granny killer, and Mark Changizi, untold numbers of people's deaths that he's responsible for, that kind of thing. So of course the lockdowners hate me. But the other side, which of course I often rail against too, is the side of pandemic folks who are making a similar kind of, a different error, but a similar kind of human bias that leads them wanting to explain events in the world that are in fact emergent phenomena. They want to explain them by the kinds of causes that we're good at in the normal everyday environments. And so I point these things out. I say, look, sure, there's lots of individual causes. There's bad actors here and bad actors there. But if you're going to understand totalitarianism, which is decentralized authoritarianism, top down, but also enforced bottom up by individuals, by your neighbors, by your family, right? That's why totalitarianism is so frightening. It's distributed, decentralized authoritarianism. And if you're going to understand that, you have to treat this problem more than just a top-down cabal of folks that can make the population just march and move however they want. That's not what's going on, right? And I'm struggling to understand that people do not like this. If you are on the anti-lockdown side like I am, and many of these people, they want it to be the case that the folks that did this to us aren't just evil. And of course, I have almost 20 videos where I'm describing here's why they're evil, right? They want them to be actually intentfully doing evil. They did this to us to hurt all of us, right? This was just, it's been around for 25 years. It's all this, they want to reset the economy, and they're willing to screw us all over for this. And that's anything less than that, and they're not going to be happy, right? And so, for example, I agree, the Event 201 types, Bill Gates types, WEF, the Klaus Schwab types, these people are culpable, not for planning for 25 years to create a virus, release a virus, instigate on purpose mass hysteria so that they could then do all of these things, control the world, and have everybody going in their cars with masks on when there's no one around, even then no one told them to do that. Event 201 and Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab and these types are culpable because they were disproportionate pushers of authoritarianism. In fact, they had prepared springs that were spring-loaded to throw out authoritarian measures on us if a pandemic were to occur. And it was all with good intent. You can actually go listen to Event 201, and all these blowhards are on there saying, oh yeah, it'd be great if we censor people this way and control, and they don't say that, control misinformation that way, and here's all these authoritarian things we should do to help, right? Now, in fact, one thing Event 201 didn't do is in their conclusion, step 3, bullet number 3 in their conclusion was don't do lockdowns, right? You can't now go say, well, they planned. This is just all part of their planning in step 17 out of 37 steps. That was the step where they were just telling us what they're going to do the very next year. That was 2019. What they're going to do the very next year in 2020. No, they're culpable because they were putting forth civil liberties violating interventions. That's why.
Good evening.
Good evening, John. How are you?
I am well. Good afternoon, Mr. or Dr. Mark Changizi from Miami now.
Oh, hey there. Good to be here. Yeah, I am. I think I was on the show since I moved to Miami, but this might be the second time since Miami.
Is it? My goodness. Oh, I think it is.
So.
Yeah. No, that's
Don't
fantastic.
mind John here. He's getting a senior age and his memory's kind of going a bit.
Hey, I'm no Joe Biden.
He's no Joe Biden, but he's getting there.
So we listened to one of your or a bit of one of your science moments there, Mark, in the pre-roll or the troll room, as we call them, did, and it was quite interesting in that you're saying don't look for the moustache twiddling evildoers because you're never going to find them, and we kind of bang on about this as well, and that no one's ever going to be held to account for this, and no one's ever going to be pulled up for it. You aren't going to see people put in jail. There isn't going to be a Nuremberg 2 and all that,
Yeah, especially this whole Nuremberg 2 thing. I keep trying to, bring people back down to earth a little bit, a little bit at a time. But the fact of the matter is, from the way we know the world works, there will be no Nuremberg 2. Nobody will be held to account for the civil liberty destroying things that no one relevant anyway will be held to account for the civil liberty destroying things that have happened to all of us over the past 3 and a bit years.
But I think Mark actually goes at it from a slightly different tangent here, in that you seem to argue the point that these people were actually operating from a position of they thought they were doing good.
Right. I mean, look, in socio-political movements, most of us are driven to understand good and evil by virtue of everyday life. With criminals, someone's been, bilking money from the company. They know they're doing wrong. The stuff that the FBI chases, rapists, murderers, things like this. Most of these people, Jeffrey Dahmer, knew he was doing wrong. He knew it. Mm-hmm. He even apparently says, but he had a compulsion. He couldn't stop. That's not how socio-political evil occurs. Socio-political evil is, of course, there are criminal things that happen, like in the midst of all of this socio-political drama and all of these mass movements and collective hysteria. You also have just cover-ups for everyday kind of, probably Fauci may have covered up. I don't know the full story. Let's suppose he did. That's a regular old FBI kind of cover-up story, right? So in the midst of all the stuff that happened, I'm not saying that there aren't regular old evil cover-ups where they knew what they were doing, but that's not what's driving this. At the socio-political level, every movement culturally evolves over time, narratives that justify the shit that they do. They're sophisticated justifications.
Justifies the means.
Right. And it's not just, of course, individually we do that sometimes in regular life. You start to create justifications for why it's okay for you to bilk money from the big company and you're little and they're big, and why do they, you come up with, but if you think that's a good justification and brains buy into it, it is 1,000 times more effective when it's an entire millions of people in a socio-political movement you're part of that movement. All the high reputation people in that movement are slowly reiterating these ethical justifications for it. Your belief in it is profound. You really believe that this is the good, and it is only by those kinds of righteous beliefs that you're doing good that you're willing and able to crush the skulls of the outgroup. If you're just bilking money from the company and suddenly it turns out like that Susie was getting fucked over really bad, like just the secretary, you're going to feel bad. You're like, shit, I didn't mean to do that. Yeah. But if you're motivated by a righteous cult, a religious-like thing, you're saying, fuck Susie. She's part of the bad guys that's doing this. We have to protect ourselves from Susie. So those are the kind of people who will destroy others and be happy and glad about it. And so a lot of people say, Mark, why are you defending them? I'm not defending them. I'm explaining who, in fact, they are, and they are culpable. Because the people that want to find only the mustache twiddling people who are who knew they were doing.
Who are the puppeteers behind the
scenes?
I'm
even setting aside the whole master planner part of it, because a lot of these people only want to punish the people that knew that were not well intended. Well, you're not only going to not find anybody, you're going to miss all of the actual culprits. All of those who are culpable, nearly every single last one thought they were doing good. Those are the people who did evil, those were the people who are evil. I don't know whether you want to call them evil or call their acts evil. I don't really care. That was the evil that was done. There were many, many individuals that did evil. More so, the longer they did it, the more they had responsibility, the bigger their voice. All of those things make them having done disproportionate evil, and they were well-intentioned, and that doesn't matter because they're always well-intentioned. It's a tautology, right? It just is no defense at all. It's just like stating a mathematical fact. Hey, but I was well-intentioned. Yeah, that's like saying, well, 2 + 2 = 4. Doesn't matter. Everybody's well-intentioned in this kind of game that we're playing.
So do these people, do these people actually get to the point where they are telling themselves so often to believe in it that they actually believe in it? That regardless,
and it's not just them, right? And it's not just them telling themselves, right? It's well, for COVID, it was most of the world. You know, the three of us, and maybe 1 to 30% of the population, depending on how you count, were in the outgroup. Every damned last person was all banding about why zero COVID was the only thing that was appropriate to do. You were a denier, you were an anti-vaxxer, you were an anti-lockdowner, you were a minimizer, all of these things. You're a grand mal killer if you weren't doing this. You were evil outgroup folks. Yeah. They really believed it. And that is in no way to say, oh, well, then they're good people. No. At the socio-political level, goodness and evilness of people and their actions has nothing to do with well-intentioned, because they all are well-intentioned by almost mathematical fact.
No, I completely see that position. And is this why, and this is just a sort of anecdotal thing, I guess, a cursory glance that I have made over the past 3 years or so, we see such a large crossover between those who were so viciously pro-narrative and the far left? Because the far left really believe the things that they do, the things that they espouse, the need to cancel people, the need to attack people, the need to go out and physically attack people for words, are good, are right, are righteous. And it seemed to be these same groups of people who were so almost religious and dogmatic in their beliefs that also hooked onto the religious and dogmatic aspect, I would say, of the last 3 years in the narratives.
Yeah, I mean, I'll slightly push back a little bit. You know, in the first month or two, there may have been a leftist leaning to it, but man, it was highly uniform across all political ideologies. Everybody that I had known on the right, the Quillette, the intellectual dark web people, libertarians, Reason Magazine even was coming out with defenses of mask mandates and things like this. So that it was really not a far left thing in the beginning. And even, folks like Robert Kennedy, a traditional far left person, now, on Team Reality's side, Naomi Wolf. So this was certainly not a standard left-right thing. And it took a couple months before it slowly became fitting the typical, polarities that we find. But yeah, it did eventually become that way. And, I wrote a thread on Twitter, sort of having in a Substack, having two people discussing, these kinds of conversations. And they go, well, if they're not bad because they had bad intent, are you saying there's no such thing as good or evil, or what makes people in fact evil? And I just did a short list of 12 things that make people in movements evil. And they include things like, number 1, violating civil liberties. 2, not independently thinking. Being unaware of your own psychological biases. Failure to do cost-benefit analyses. Treating certain freedoms as taboo. Hubris to control others for your good. Thinking in terms of in-group and out-group. Failure to take seriously the precautionary principle. One thing coming to dominate your entire decision-making, like zero COVID. Intolerance to opposing viewpoints and cancellation and censorship. Maintaining one's position with disregard to the counter evidence. And also, finally, believing your political opposition is filled with sinister, not well-intentioned people. Now, I think all human groups have tendencies to fall and violate a lot of these a lot of the time. But, as a libertarian who tries to stay away from being left, right, and getting into those whole debates, there's no question when you look through this list that the left has over the last 20 or 30 years been hitting or violating more of these things than does the right, in my opinion, more often, and are more prone, I think, to engaging in evil because you don't care as much about civil liberties. They're much happier with centralized control of the government to make these decisions for us and so on.
No,
it's like
sorry. Is it your contention then that the people involved in this, the leadership of the world, effectively fell into lockstep, not through some kind of plan, to depopulate the world or whatever, but effectively they fell into lockstep because they all assumed the same level of fear and fed off each other and effectively just reinforced their position to the extent that they all could not see anything but zero COVID, and then worked to that end almost exclusively.
That's exactly right. And it's not just at the level of leadership. And this is collective hysteria. This was my tweet on March 17th of 2020. The moral of coronavirus 19 will be that the dangers of social contagion far outweigh the dangers of biological contagion. It's exactly these kinds of social contagions, collective hysterias, that are the things that sweep in new righteous cult-like religions that motivate whole populations bottom up to create top-down authoritarianism. They want the authoritarianism. They beg Boris Johnson, give us authoritarianism for God's sake. And Boris had no choice but to do it in some sense. Now, you could say he backed down, but this is the way that pressures work. It's not just top-down. It was definitely not marching orders by some centralized central planners. That's not how this works. This is due to when there's dangerous authoritarianism, it's not because of the tin pot dictators where in a banana republic where a new dictator kills the old dictator and the whole population just does its thing. They just sort of shrug and move on because there's no righteous new religion or anything associated with it. They can't push their authoritarianism on the people, and they're weak and not very powerful, just like all bureaucracies are. The only way that a bureaucracy like a government can have the power to go from authoritarianism to totalitarianism is because their authoritarianism gets decentralized and distributed across the population because the population is in on it. And it's not that the population is on it just because, hey, the puppeteers, let's decide that we're going to make the population. No, this is not easy. They can try a lot of the times. Mostly it's not going to work, but occasionally there are certain buttons that they might press, or the people are excited about something and then they press the government to do it, and it creates this big feedback loop. And now you can get totalitarianism. Snitches on the street yelling at you to wear a mask, to get back in your home, to stop having parties at your house, to get a vaccine or you can't play with us. That's what happened worldwide, and it only happened because these kinds of psychosocial forces.
I think here in this country, the best way we can evidence that point that you're making is that for most of these mandates and laws, certainly in this country, not so much, I guess, in your country, but there were legal loopholes and exemptions that could get you out of all of it just by saying words without evidence, baked into all of the mandates, baked into the laws, and people chose not to enact those things. Every single one of these people could have walked around without a mask on by simply uttering the two words, I'm exempt. And by law, they could not ask you for any evidence of that. So not even the police could. Nobody could. And still the population did not, and they knew this was a loophole. It was baked clearly into the legislation, and they did not enact it on the most.
But people,
when they could have.
But people who chose to exert their civil rights not to do these things were castigated by their fellows, weren't they?
Yeah, but by their fellows, not by their superiors.
No, that's what I'm saying. They were castigated by their fellows. Yeah.
Right. This was bottom up enforcement of this, and it was and from bottom up, they went the other way that you can tell these things, and it's basically the same as what you just mentioned, Ben, but it's yours is, I think, more subtle, and I haven't really thought about the way that you said it. But a more obvious case is that there were whole blue cities and red cities as well. Mm-hmm. There was no mask mandate outdoors, but when I went to some of these places, every person, even people on canoes, had masks. Joggers had masks. Every single person had a mask, and it was not. They went beyond the mandates. They went beyond the mandates in every respect, right?
Yeah.
No, there was no outdoor mandate here in the United Kingdom, and yet you would see them outdoors wearing them all the time. You see people driving alone in their cars in them. Well, it was bizarre.
Right.
What
And
gets me though is what's going on in Canada right now with this strange upsurge and it's the same text in every tweet. It's I don't accept that this I don't accept that this what's it called, this transmission has to this respiratory transmission has to continue unbroken, and then wear a mask. And it's like, where has this madness come from in Canada? It's bizarre.
Yeah.
It's like a bot farm, but they appear to be real people.
Right. There's no way that anybody who lived through there should be no way that anybody who lived through this and watching these people, and these people mean it. They're broadcasting their righteous membership in this cult. So what people are doing is, just for those who haven't seen it, you might post a picture of yourself with a mask and write this little statement about how important it is to keep wearing masks. I'm paraphrasing.
Yep.
And that person will quote tweet you and then put their picture and say the same thing. And then some quote tweets them. And the idea is that it continues and it's this sort of infinite chain. But yet there are folks who look at all of these things and still do not see the sense in which this was a bottom-up, something that pervaded the minds of everybody. All that they see is
definitely bottom up.
Yeah. All they see is Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates. Yeah. And if they were to get their way, I think Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates are amongst, the higher level tiers of culpability. And that's true even though they didn't in fact plan. This is not a pandemic, but they're still high on the list of people who are culpable. Yeah. But much more culpable are actual elected leaders, frankly, right? And they're not going to give people a pass because they were all victims of these puppeteers who did this. Yeah. Right.
But that's a great point, though, because in our country, the opposition party, you're in trouble when the opposition party not only agree with the government on everything, and I mean absolutely everything. They agreed with every restriction the government put in place, and in some cases asked them to do it harder.
Right. Now and they're big farmer supporters suddenly. Yeah. For example. Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry.
It has been. I think we've all aged terribly, to be fair, over the course of the last 3 years. Almost feels like we've been banging our heads against brick walls.
Yeah, I know.
We try and say these things.
And the thing is, you get castigated from both sides because people don't want to disbelieve that everything they did was to no avail. When the evidence comes out and, masks don't appear to make it much of a difference when it comes to reducing respiratory viruses. When the evidence comes out, the lockdowns don't appear to have made much of a difference when you compare countries that did.
John, are you telling me that following the one-way arrow in the supermarket made no difference, John?
But when you see the evidence between countries that did it and countries that didn't, like Sweden, etc., and then and I think these people find it very, very difficult to come to terms with the fact they've been basically hoodwinked for the last 2 years.
Of course they do.
I wish you were right in the sense that, in my experience, most of the people that were pro-lockdown, pro-intervention, either are just no longer thinking about it anymore and don't see any of this conversation. Yep. They're just past, and they just literally, or they really still do think the interventions all worked, and they are literally surprised if you tell them that they didn't work. It's like they've never heard it before. And they are in no position, because at this point, I saw all the experts on TV for 3 years, and they were saying, so you're of course wrong, because they're just hearing this from left field. And, this is, they know I'm the only scientist they even know. In some sense, they have, I'm not some crazy person walking by. There's someone that they like, and they know I'm a scientist, but there's zero respect for that opinion. I don't think that anybody still is really struggling with this, except for a few people. Like there's Kevin Bass, which is, I don't know, there's some high profile people that switched, understood that they screwed up, apologized for it. They're still not 100% there, in my opinion, of truly getting what happened. But there's just a very small number of people. I'm not sure that the numbers are large. And I think that history will tell the story, but we will go to the graves being looked at as kooks for believing that these were rational.
Yes. But you know what? I'm happy. I'm happy to go to the grave like that, because I know that I was right. I know that we were right. We tried our best not to go down rabbit holes, and the only reason we were saying the things that we were saying was to help people, and people don't understand that. I didn't need to go out and do what I did for the last 3 years. I didn't need to show up at places and show people they were empty. I didn't need to do any of that. I didn't do it for me. I did it to show them that they were being, effectively lied to.
Yeah.
And I will nail my colours to the mast if they want to call me a kook when I go to my grave. I'm there. I'm there because I know I did the right thing.
Do you like the way he casually shows us how good his new apartment is?
Yeah,
I was just going to go get myself a beer. It's Thursday night. I can justify a beer here.
Nicely done,
Why not?
sir. Nicely done.
Well, I mean, this house is like 1/5 the size of my previous house. That's it. You saw it all. That's it.
Yeah, but you are in Miami.
I've got Dr. Pepper Vanilla Float imported from over where you are. So good stuff. Good stuff. Probably terrible for me. Could not give two shits.
Yeah, well, it's probably good.
One thing I was going to mention. Look, some of this is there's the philosophical point of the well-intentionedness. I have this. I started this free expression institute, freex.group website, and I did this in 2021 to try to understand mathematically, scientifically understand these psychosocial forces, these collectivist areas, free expression, all of these kinds of mass movement kinds of things that happen. The kinds of people that need to study those are the kind of people that understand psychology and emergent phenomena and evolutionary stuff and are also physics math types. That's me.
Yep.
And we need to understand it. So there's just the getting it right, trying to attribute and understand culpability. And there's also the problem is that if you get it wrong, which I already mentioned, you're not going to actually find the people that you think that you should blame. You're just going to be looking for puppeteers that master planned this, and you're going to miss all the actual culpable people. But a third reason for getting this right and not making this mistake that the evil people have to be evil intentioned is that the people that we're arguing with, the people that are the lockdowners, regular people who pushed it, they know that they had good intentions. They know that they had good intentions. They really did have good intentions. If you're going to convince them, you can't start off the story saying you lied on purpose to hurt people. You lied on purpose because your plan, you heard about it, that you wanted to kill a certain number of vaccinated people, that you wanted to track us with, and all of this on, like, that you've been part of this scandal to enslave us. This is like, no, like, what are you talking? This is a non-starter, right? You're not going to convert anybody that's even remotely on the fence, which is the only people who get
this for years.
Say again?
I've said exactly this for years. If you come at people from a position of anger, throwing blunt force allegations like that at them, there is no conversation to be had. They're gone. They're out.
They're gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ben, I think you need to turn up your mic still farther. If this is what other people,
pushed it away from
this is what other people are hearing, you're still like half of the level of.
Bring your mic closer to your mouth.
A little better, yeah.
Yes, sir. There you go. There you go, sir.
Oh,
there you go.
Welcome to the room.
But then they can see less of my beautiful face.
Yeah, that's always a bonus. Don't worry about it.
That's right. Win.
Still the sex appeal here, John.
Yeah, okay. So the thing that gets me, though, Mark, is the fact that from either, I mean, as you said, there were effectively two sides. There were the pro and the against. But the people that were against were making this construct of this cabal that's running the world, and everything is towards certain aims. And I think while certain governments may have looked at things and thought, well, we were able to get that legislation through quite easily because people were frightened. Maybe we could slip, central bank digital currency in under the table as well. I don't think these things are necessarily connected. I think everybody is working towards whatever they're trying to work towards. And people like Klaus Schwab, I don't think he's running the show. I think he's effectively trying to make money for himself. Villain. Yeah, but I think, as Mark says, I think in his own head he's well-intentioned. He's trying to make the world a better place.
And he's exploiting this opportunity, of course. Yeah. He's exploiting it. Amazon exploited the opportunity to right? But they didn't help plan this, right? Yeah. There's so many, and here's another thing people will say, hey, Mark, if there's no master planner, how do you explain all of these people conspiring with those people, conspiring, all these forces everywhere? People were a case of collective phenomena. For example, when you see starlings, right? And they're all like those birds that are all like doing these amazing kind of things.
Yeah.
Or you see a bunch of lightning bugs all interacting. They suddenly are all acting as one. All of these kinds of collective phenomena where there's synchronization or coordination at the group level happens because of thousands or millions or trillions of pairwise interactions between them. The starlings are feeling the pressure of one another. They're all coordinating through lots and lots of pairwise connections. They're all doing and pushing and stuff. You can't go look and say, look, that guy was pushing that one, and this big rock was pushing that rock. Well, yeah, there's lots of rocks in an avalanche that are pushing other rocks. That doesn't mean that big rock is the one responsible for planning the avalanche. Okay, well, who's the first one? Many people say, who's the first stone that moved on the avalanche? Well, that too doesn't make, that's irrelevant. The first stone might have been a little pebble that hit just another little pebble slightly, right? That doesn't really matter because any pebble would have been the potentially, once the ground was ready to move, almost any pebble would have been enough to do it. These are the wrong ways to think about culpability at the level, at these sorts of scales. It's just the wrong way to think. And there's another thing that pisses me off. People would never, if I was in quantum mechanics, and I'm a physicist too, I'm not very good at quantum mechanics stuff, and if we were arguing atomic scale stuff, people wouldn't walk in and then start claiming they have strong intuitions about what is true and not true for atomic level stuff. Yeah. I'm telling you, emergent level phenomena, and whether it's economies, none of us have great intuitions for how economies work. It's extremely complicated. You can't talk about normal linear causal effect, cause and effect. It's holistic, which is why economics is its own field, and it's inherently a collectivist, not collectivist in the sense of communism, but you have to understand at the collective level. Same thing for understanding socio-political movements. It's inherently an emergent level thing, and the intuitions there are totally different than everyday life, just as quantum mechanics are. And so, but everybody, and in fact, and we even understand better how normal people, all of us, under normal circumstances, get it wrong because we're used to normal causal linear explanations in normal life and normal culpability and normal bad intent that happens in normal life. And so we suffer all of these things. No matter how many times I say this, I say you don't need, in fact, socio-political level evil is not due to evil intentioned people. And they say, okay, Mark, okay, I get your point. So I see that there's, I'll give you 95% of the world wasn't evil intended, but there still were evil people. There was probably some at the top that were evil. And it's like, you're missing the point. You seem to want to, you can't, for them, unless there's an ingredient of evil intended somewhere in the mix, then they can't get the evil to spread because evil has to end at an evil intentioned person, an actual mustache twiddler going, oh, right? That's what they want.
They need to
think right? And that's until you. So like, okay, but still, there was one witch somewhere, right? That's otherwise you couldn't infect this entire population. It's this notion of cooties that there's an essence. The essence of evilness is only found in someone who has evil intent. They purposely understand the good, but want to violate it, right? And that's never the case at the socio-political scales. They have their own twisted, fucked up notion of the good, and they really are well intended in that fucked up light, right?
Yeah.
They're evil because their good is wrong. Their good is in fact evil.
So Spencer in the chat room asks us, how can you explain, right, where is it? How do you explain the narrative where leaders in different countries all use the same phrases very often? For instance, like build back better.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to ask, I'm turning on the air conditioner, it's getting warm in here. Here, another intuition people have is they say, hey, how do you explain all of this synchronization, this seeming coordination, right?
Yep.
Seeming coordination would seem to require, like, that there was a master planner. But the classic paradigm case of how you get coordination with large numbers of decentralized distributed creatures is through emergent phenomena. All of these kinds of large scale events where you synchronize or have highly coordinated behavior happens because it's decentralized. No central planner could take an economy, for example, and make it such that when you show up at the store, you're going to end up with the Twinkies there that you expect every time. They're going to be on that shelf. It's synchronized to know that, okay, we need more or less, and do that in 10,000 places, and when the price rises here, it rises everywhere else in synchrony. There is no master planner that does that, much less for the other million products that are out there. It happens because of these massive decentralized distributed processes that you can only understand at the immersion level. Synchrony and seeming coordination is only explainable by virtue of these kinds of emergent phenomena. Copycat behaviors, it's just spreading through like a meme across brains, not because there's puppeteers, which could never, ever coordinate anything. If you've ever known of any bureaucracy at all, or and if you've ever worked in the military or the government, they can't make crap happen in a coordinated fashion at all.
Yeah, they couldn't, as they used to say, you couldn't organize a piss up in a
brewery.
Yeah.
Right. And the funny thing is that a lot of these people arguing this are very anti-communist, like I am, right? Mm-hmm. They spend their life arguing for free markets. They supposedly understand the value of decentralization. They understand the wisdom in the hand, the invisible hand of Adam Smith. That's the brilliance of free markets and why communism and socialism is so stupid in terms of you can't create the kind of wealth that we have that's grown over time through those processes. But then suddenly when there's socio-political events, which is the same kind of thing, it's just instead of prices spreading and goods spreading, it's free expression and conversation and memes that are spreading. There's a very parallel side of these different things that I've talked about. Then suddenly they think that master planners are able to coordinate all of these things. Well, if the master planners are so good, well, let those same master planners control economies because they're as bright as they are, in this case, to do evil. But let's get the same kind of bright people to just control the economy and make much better economies than the free market has. Right? So suddenly they believe in central planners.
I'd like to go down a slightly different route, okay, and I've been arguing the case for this. You remember the train crash in Ohio, and I
had just moved out of Ohio, which suggests that I was involved in the incident.
Exactly, it's you. You were behind it. So what was it? Palestine, Ohio, right? And it had the bad train crash, and people are going, "This is really bad." And then the press. And my contention is the press were doing what the press always do, is they pick up similar things that happen other places and they start to look as if there's a pattern of events occurring, right? Now, when I looked into it, there's like 12,000 major rail incidents every year in the United States of America, right?
Yeah.
So that's 1,000 incidents every month, roughly. So that could be how many derailments? How many derailments could there be every month? There could be 50. There could be, there could be 3 some months. There could be 50 the others. So what gets me is all these train crashes then get reported, and everybody's going, we're under attack. The infrastructure's being attacked, and it's not. In my view, 1, it's a coincidence. 2, your infrastructure is actually shite. Because, I mean, you've seen the train tracks and things, they're all over the place. You've got, and a lot of your terrain is dealing with big extremes in temperature variation, which is really bad for train tracks. So my view is that it's all coincidence and there's nothing really behind it. And it's the same with the fires in grain stores and things like that. I think if you dig into that, you'll find that there are fires in these places on an ever-increasing basis. But I don't think there's a coordination behind it. What do you think? Does that sound like a reasonable...
Yeah, I agree. I mean, people always believe there's larger patterns than are there. This is another kind of bias. I was going to show you, if I hit share, will it pop up something on my screen to my...
Should do, yeah.
Let's see.
Should send it across.
If I do that... let's see.
If you've got hold on, let me just check. Can everybody share?
Yeah, now I'm going to hit share.
So,
can you see that?
Yep, we can.
Something's going on. Yep.
Now, the point of this one is, let me just expand it. Really, what I want to make, there's a meme, saying that the media is the virus, but really, and of course they are. Media is, of course, one of the big culprits in all of these cases. But in some sense, they're baseline. They're always amplifying the story to make it seem more panicky and so forth, and we just expect that. But here's an example of the number of times that Time Magazine alone was being panicky about a virus. Right? You can see this is this is a talk in terms of master planners, and people then something. Okay, maybe they couldn't master plan this level of coordination, seeming coordination, but they could decide to do a collective hysteria. They'll just say, okay, in 2020 we're just going to induce some mass hysteria. We'll just do it then. As part of our 34-step plan, step 17 is that in 2020 we'll induce mass hysteria. No, that's not how mass hysteria works. Mass hysteria is a kind of virality, and if you've ever tweeted, most of your tweets don't go viral. They flop, right?
No.
Or maybe in the first 10 minutes, you suddenly get 20 retweets. You're like, oh, that's great. And then suddenly it just dies, right?
Yeah.
But here in the United Kingdom, I will say this. Here in the United Kingdom, we actually had a department in our government called the Psychological or Behavioural Insights Team, also known as the Nudge Unit. And their literal job was to create mass hysteria.
Do you want to stop sharing, Mark, and we'll go back to full screen?
Well, yeah, but they are a consequence of the collective hysteria. The collective hysteria had already started 2 or 3 or 4 weeks before they were even put together.
Yeah.
And the reason I want to show you this is an example. Each time you do a tweet, this is like time doing tweets. I'm just sort of using it as an analogy. In 2003, 2004, it duds, right? But in 2020, this kind of meme going through society suddenly spread. And it went suddenly viral, right? And the virality happens not just because of Time Magazine that did that. It's because other people retweet. And this is the kind of thing that can't be planned. It has a decentralized chance coin flip to it. It's very rare, but but you can't reliably engineer a collective hysteria. Now, of course, once the hysteria got going, March 11th or so of 2020, then loads of folks are responsible for pushing it further. The landslide is happening, right? Yeah. And some rocks might have been good rocks, boulders. They said, I'm not going to move. I'm going to be I'm going to be really responsible and not further.
Like Boris Johnson, he said, look, we're not going to panic. We're going to step back and see how things progress before we make any rash decisions. 2 days later, he changed his mind.
Right. So there you've got a big rock, tried to hold on, but literally millions of little rocks were bashing into him, and he was so pressured he eventually budged, right? So then he hit other rocks, and then he hit rocks that were this nudge unit, which of course, so all of these people are culpable. Then the bigger the rock and the further they slid before holding, they're all culpable. But none of those, you can't say they're the ones who started all, because in fact, even if the nudge unit hadn't existed, and this doesn't defend them because they're so culpable, but you can't say that it's because of the nudge unit, because had the nudge unit not, it would be like going to a mountainside and taking off one of the big boulders and asking whether still the rocks below it would have probably shifted. They may well have, because other stuff would have been hitting those and causing the thing to continue going. They are still culpable for encouraging and pushing this kind of hysteria, but that's not the cause. There isn't a linear cause, a normal everyday sense of cause and effect. It's not like that. These are in loops, even more loopy than an avalanche, which is still kind of, bottom rocks don't go back up and hit the top rocks again, right? It's still one dimension. It's still unidirectional in that sense. It is so much more complicated than that. I feel like we missed what was the larger arc of that conversation. I'm forgetting.
Well, I don't know. I think we probably got there. The troll room are now calling us coincidence theorists, right?
Okay.
And they're not happy because we're not considering things like Operation Mockingbird, running the media, centralized talking points, and all that. Well, yeah, no. You've got to understand. You got to understand into it. Yeah, but you got to understand that we're not saying these people didn't do wrong, and we're not saying these things don't happen, because I'm pretty convinced that there is operations underway. I mean, look at the Gulf of Tonkin. That was a false flag. That was hidden for years, and it actually happened. The incident never occurred, but they generated it and used it to kick off the Vietnam War. Now, governments will do things like this, yes, and they will do it all the thing, but I don't think the whole world worked in
Right. So a lot of people want to say, oh, but you're saying then that Event 201 isn't culpable. No, Event 201 folks are exactly among the higher level culpability.
Absolutely.
These Absolutely. Have created traps ready to spring out if there is ever a pandemic or fear of a pandemic, to implement all of these authoritarian rules, including censorship of misinformation. They were doing it. If you watch these blowhards, they are doing it because they're well-intentioned. Watch them. They believe they're well-intentioned. They believe this is the way to handle a pandemic. And they have these things, and that's not the only one. There's tons of these things. These Bill Gates and all these people have all of these funded things ready to help that are all basically leading to authoritarian measures. That is also what is the Trusted News Initiative is probably somehow connected to this. All of these CNN and social media is all working together to help, right? They're all well-intentioned to help. But all of those conspirings, these are all just some of the bigger ones of thousands and millions of conspirings to help, are exactly the culpable people that hurt us, right? That none of those were master planners who said, let's make it happen in 2020 so that we can kill a whole lot of people. That's missing the point. That the people that are most dangerous are the people that want to help you. Those are the people.
The scariest words you can hear are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
But that's exactly right, because what's happening in Ukraine right now is the people that are helping the Ukrainians are causing more and more deaths, because they've given them the opportunity to continue the onslaught, and the Russians are continuing to wipe them out. And I am firmly of the belief, and I think the troll room will agree here, while we don't really pick any sides, I think Putin thinks he's doing the right thing by doing what he's doing.
Most definitely. These are paradigm examples. Wars are always fought by sides that have created narratives that believe the shit they say. Right? And you cannot doubt that. If you misunderstand that, you're misunderstanding. They're evil. Or one side or both sides might be evil, but never doubt that they've come to believe what they say. And the leaders believe it more than anybody else. They have drank more of the Kool-Aid than anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg makes a point here in the chat, and it's an absolutely brilliant point, and correct. No one is helping the Ukrainians. The military-industrial complex are just helping themselves, and I would agree with that. I would agree with that, because obviously war is good for business, and war has always been good for business, especially when it comes to the United States.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see that in the chat. Oh, I've got.
It says you got top chat on. That's why.
Yeah, that's why. That's silly.
Yeah, for example, Bush and Blair never for 1 second believed the weapons of mass destruction lie. Of course they didn't.
Of course they didn't. But they took the opportunity to do what they thought was right by wiping out Saddam, which turned out to be probably
installing freedom.
Yeah, well, which turned out to be probably one of the worst things they could have done at that point in time. And the same thing's going to happen in Ukraine.
So the road to hell is paved with the best intentions. It always is.
Well, this is one of these. Also, phrases like that and the banality of evil. There's a lot of phrases, and what's the one that everybody's always retweeting? The people that are with the best intentions. There's another famous C.S. Lewis quote that people are constantly forgetting it right now. They hear these, but in some sense, they really don't take it to heart. And still, when they see socio-political level evil, they ignore everybody that's actually there and just want to find the person that they think master planned this for the sake of evil, even by their own lights, right? That's all. And so they forget all of the banality of evil and paved with good intentions, and just it wisps away from their. So all this wisdom from these previous democides and genocides just gets completely lost with the new generations. So, my struggle is to fight the lockdowners, but I've also spending a lot of my time just trying to just get people to understand what exactly is the evil that we're dealing with, that we finally saw for the first time. We saw these totalitarian forces, most of us, for the first time in our lives. Not in Nazi Germany, not in Cultural Revolution of China, not where my family comes from in Iran, where there's these, we can say these are fucked up foreign cultures and, whatever. We can make excuses because we're not like them because of blah, blah, blah. Germans are, rigid and stiff and, whatever. No, it happens to anybody. It's the same stuff, different icing. We saw it. But a lot of people still don't understand the moral of it, and they still want to attribute it not to something bad about the nature of humans and what we do in groups. And ultimately, that's what we need to understand, what I'm aiming to understand. They want to attribute it just to some particular master planners who did this. And if you do that, one, you're not going to find the right people. Two, you're going to excuse all of the people that really did it, and you're not going to understand actually what happened so that we can try to inhibit and stop this kind of thing from happening again.
Yeah, but I'm going to once again go back to the chat because Harold here says, you see people moaning about the population being high all the time. It's not like it's a rarely held belief. Absolutely you do, but those people moan about it because from their point of view, and this is the point Mark's trying to make here, they think it would be best for the planet or for themselves or what they think is a good intention to enact some kind of depopulation. The people that talk about bringing the population down, they think they've got a good reason for doing it. And they think what they're saying, what they're doing is right. It's not, but they think that it is.
Right. I don't even understand this. I mean, I do understand in some sense, but just when you ask them, do you really think there's someone walking around who says, oh, I have this. Oh, today I've got this really not well-intentioned idea, and I'm really going to further this. Try to further this not well-intentioned idea. That's not how things work. And this is not a defense of them. I mean, like, why are you defending them? Like, this is the only kind of evil that you can imagine: is someone walking around actually twiddling their mustache, saying, "I'm going to do something not well-intentioned today." That's your model of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't.
I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to go back to Greg here in the chat, right? And he says, I disagree. The Five Eyes in Israel have been undertaking extreme rendition and torture and the end of habeas corpus on the grounds of terrorism for decades now. Now, I don't understand what we've said that would make you disagree, because we haven't said that's right. Sorry?
No.
What Israel and America and the CIA, they think they're working to the best aims of their country. That's what they think. And they always have.
We say that they are well-intentioned, it doesn't mean that they're right. Our whole point is well-intentioned and evil, right? The reason that it's evil is not because they're not well-intentioned. The reason that it's evil is because their notion of the good is violating all of these principles of what is in fact good. That's the key. And I listed 12 key principles, including civil liberties is number one, that you have to follow. Otherwise, you're engaged in evil. And you can be perfectly well-intentioned, and that's not a defense, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I was just following orders was never a defense. And let's face it, this conversation has not been about, and this is to the chat room, has not been about us defending these people, has not been about us defending. It's been about putting ourselves in their shoes and saying, well, why might they be doing these things? And it comes back to the phrase, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, because in their mind, not in our mind, because we don't believe they're right, nobody believes they're right, but in their minds, what they are doing or what they have done is for what they would consider the greater good. And the greater good is always an issue, because nobody can ever agree on what the greater good might be. So
and unless you're Jeffrey Dahmer type, you don't torture people. Unless you're that kind of, you only can torture people because you righteously believe it's the right thing to do. It's because you have a fucked up notion of the good. Now, I want to disagree with you, by the way, when you say, and I never have understood exactly this, despite everything else I've been saying. I was following orders. I was just following orders. Look, a lot of people say that I was just following orders isn't a defense. I don't understand actually that point of view. A lot of times it can be a bullshit defense because they really could have disagreed. But the stereotypical example is, of course, where you're a corporal, or you're a low-level, military person, and literally you're following orders, or you will be hung, or you'll be shot. You'll be shot. So if someone coerces you to do this bad thing, or you will die. I mean, you could choose. I'm not going to say that it's obvious that you should always do it. Maybe you should just die, but you know that someone else is going to do the same damn thing anyway. This is you are coerced to do it. And standard, normal, everyday life intuitions are not clear that you should, that you are you're blamed because you were coerced to do something. So to me, this is an aside, but I'm not sure why people have this really strong intuition that how does the phrase? Someone ordered me to do it. Or, that can be a defense. You were threatened, or your family was threatened.
I do accept your position. You're making a good point there, and I'm quite happy to step back, because in that sort of extreme circumstance, no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But most of these people weren't following orders. They were actively going beyond the orders that were given, they were themselves going out of their way to find their own ways to enforce and snitch and show allegiance to this new righteous COVID religion.
Yeah. And
remember,
effectively,
these people,
it did become a religion, didn't it? Because it basically became a belief system. And the same thing's happening with climate change, because see, as soon as you start using the word denier, to me, you've lost an argument, because there should be perfect opportunity to deny something in science.
absolutely.
Well, it's not becoming this way it's been like this since the 1980s. And then, so what scared me much more about COVID was that it went from 0 to 100 miles per hour overnight. And so it was an attack on society and a totalitarian sort of attack overnight. This has been around for 50 years, this slow, but I don't think it ever has led to the kind of collective hysteria, kind of, we have to do something today or yesterday. We've had to do it already and completely. So it's basically a terrible drain slowly on society between all these green laws and all this bullcrap. But it's something where, hopefully we can still survive despite all this detritus, that we're having to walk, that's hanging from us because for all these stupid reasons. But it never became, it was still 1,000 times less dangerous than what we saw in March of 2020.
So the thing that worries me is because effectively we've allowed ourselves to be in the position that we have been over the last 3 years, are they just going to keep going down this route?
Yeah, I see both sides. The one side is that now that we've done it, it's easier to do again. We have the precedent. I have all, the counterintuitions that there's so many of us. I think certainly there was maybe only 5% of the population against this in March and April of 2020. I feel like it's because then once it became polarized and left-right, by May of 2020, it was pretty polarized. And since then, it's definitely become super polarized. Now we've got, I think, 50% of the population that's just against it for typical left-right reasons. Not necessarily because they've even thought it through. They just are going to believe that their team that they're on. So I'm hoping now that it's, and these are one of the advantages of having left-right bullcrap argument all the time, because it's a constant counterbalance to collective hysterias will typically fill up one side and not spill over to the other side, or at least not for long, and then it can bring some kind of balance. And for years I complained, it's like, oh, this polarization is just ridiculous. I think it's actually a counterbalance. The most dangerous time that I saw was in March 2020, when all sides were completely 100% on board with lockdowns. The only a couple people on Twitter before I found anybody was a couple capital C communists actually, who were like, freeze the economy. This is crazy. They were not with the typical leftists. Like, communists are constantly have a chip on their shoulder with running economies because they know in their heart they can't do it, right? And so the last thing they want to do is freeze an economy. They're barely able to get the thing functioning at all and feed anybody. So so that was dangerous. Everybody was saying the same thing. But then once it at least settles out into 50-50, you have some kind of natural pushback on crazy collective hysteria idea. So I'm now more in favor of wanting this weird polarization, even to the extent that it's irrational. It's sort of a buffer, kind of like federalism is now a buffer against the spread of kind of collective hysteria across these different microcultures from state to state in the United States. Federalism is something that the United States really, I think, has been the only thing that I think worked structurally is federalism in the United States. It allowed these different experiments to happen, not because of government, but just each nation, each state has its own little cultures, a little bit different over time. And now the number of people that have moved to Florida has grown like crazy because people from these red states like New York and California all have moved here. Not all, but tremendous immigration here, immigration from those places.
What worries me about our country is this didn't happen here because although we had effectively three different forms of government, we had the Tories in England, we had the SNP in Scotland, and we had the Labour in Wales, which, one's left, one's right, and the other one's just mad. Right? But the thing is, they all voted for the same things, and they all seem to try and outdo each other with the amount of restrictions that we're putting in. We haven't had this. You still see it because we haven't had this left-right divide because you still see plenty of people on the right that are still wanting to continue with the lockdown route, to continue with the mask route. And, you know, we don't really have that left-right divide. Even in your marches, you didn't have that left-right divide because you had, like, what's his name? You had Piers. What's his name?
Piers Corbyn.
Yeah.
He's a lefty.
He's an old lefty. Yeah.
Yep.
And yet you had right-wingers as well. I mean, so we never had that divide in it. And the problem is, I think it's diluted the effect in this country. And that I think the majority of the country would still do that if they were told to.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that we're a two-party, effectively, implicitly, or structurally, really a two-party system, I would never have thought of this as a potential reason for arguing its advantages prior to 2020. I mean, I don't think anybody would have thought of this necessarily. There's a lot of ways that I think about libertarianism as libertarian, about structure of government and separation, insulating the power. I've completely had to rethink. It's not about the dangers from the government doing shit to us, which is, of course, part of it, but it's much more. It's the dangers about the collective hysteria suddenly coming up, and then Supreme Court, courts don't matter. Courts don't finally get up and running and maybe start doing anything for a couple of years. And maybe they slowly start undoing all of the damage that's been done, but they're too slow. But none of the formal constraints matter, because once all of these politicians, all of these judges, they all have families, and all of their families and all of their friends are all saying the same thing, that we are all going to die unless you do this, right? And you're a morally terrible person unless you do this. It just spreads through those supposed insulated spots without any, it just goes right through, right? But again, federalism, state to state, separation of powers, I think that it actually stopped, right? And it relied on different cultures, different
Oh, I think we might have lost Mark.
No, he's been cut. Has he?
Is he gone?
Hey, no, he's back. You're back. Oh, you were not back.
Oh, I think he's back.
Are you coming back?
Have we had an issue? It wouldn't be wouldn't be an episode of Chasing Dissent without some kind of technical issue.
Are you back?
He's back.
I may be having wireless issues here. Yeah. Anyway, federalism has been, I think, shown to be one of the only things that I trust in American democratic system here.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I understand that, and
I think federalism is showing itself in France at this very moment in time, because France is a federal republic as well. So I think there are maybe lessons to be learned here, and I have been banging on about our system needing ripped out and replaced, because I certainly don't trust the system that we've got in place in this country. I don't think it's doing any of us any favours, and I don't think it's working to our benefits.
And just a little plug there, while John mentioned France, those of you that are watching, remember, May the 9th, I will be live from central Paris looking for some protests. So we're going to go and have a look over there. So don't forget to join us then. Anyway, John, continue.
Yes, well, I was thinking that this is, it's not a very uplifting part, but I think we're probably getting near the end of this conversation. Mark, is there anything you'd like to plug? Your glasses or your Substack or a new book, perhaps, or anything?
Yeah, I since I last talked to you, Elon Musk uncensored me, so I'm finally back to...
me.
No, congratulations. That's great. So... have you been still?
Oh yeah.
His old account is still banned.
I've got an account from 2009 that had something like 15,000 followers on it, and still banned.
Oh, from 2009.
Mm-hmm. I was early doors.
Yeah, so I don't even know whether they have. That's old school enough. They may not even have access to that. Who knows what's going on with that?
The account's still there. I can still log into it. I just get told I can't do anything.
It's just still banned.
Yeah. Well, anyway, my book came out last year while I was under deep censorship from, in fact, our case, we're the First Amendment case against the federal government.
Yep.
We are under appeal now. We have 7 amicus briefs in our defense. And so I'll let you know how that appeal goes. But during that censorship for 2 years, my 6th book came out, took 10.
Oh, I think he's having trouble again. Oh,
He's
I
back.
did it again. Can you hear me now? Anyway,
Yep.
the book was severely hampered because if you can't mention your book or plug your book or do anything to promote it, it's effectively dead. So Expressly Human, it's on the foundations of free expression, and it was censored. Expressly Human, decoding the language of emotion, but it's about the origins of emotional expressions, why we have them, and how it's crucial for understanding free expression itself.
And
Okay.
if you're not already, if you are on Twitter, go and follow Mark. It's his name, at Mark Changizi. Make sure you follow him there, and there'll be links to everything, including his Substack
yeah.
and other things he's doing over there. John.
Yeah, well, I'd like to thank you, Mark, because this has been quite an illuminating conversation. You've certainly given me food for thought.
Me too.
It's a different way of looking at things. I think both Ben and I have been going through this. Not everything is a conspiracy phase at the moment, which maybe upsets some of the people in the troll room. But not everything is a conspiracy. While conspiracies, I have no doubt, do exist and do come true, and many of them have actually been found out over the last 3 or 4 years. Not everything is, and I think what the way that you've explained how society works with regard to doing evil without individuals thinking that they're actually doing it, that explains a lot that went on in the last 3 years in my mind, certainly.
Well, it's a pleasure being here. Oh, sorry. Go on.
I've got someone in the chat asking if at some point would you come back and talk about AI, please?
Happy to. I've got in my Science Moment series on YouTube and Rumble, I've got 4 sort of chat GPT kinds of topics going to come out in the next week or two, and I plan on doing more later. Yep.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that as well.
We will certainly
because
book that in.
I have strong views on AI or the lack of it. I think AI is an oxymoron personified.
Well, Mark couldn't be here today, so that's why this avatar.
That's what the glitches
Why
are.
it went so well.
So I think that's been great conversation, Mark, and I thank you very much for taking the time out to come back on the show. You're obviously more than welcome to come on at any time. We really appreciate your insights.
A lot of fun.
Yep, and it's been great. It's been great for me. Has it been great for you, Ben?
It's been great for me. Has it been great for you, Mark?
It has been.
Okay. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone that attended this Chasing Dissent live episode with Dr. Mark Changizi live from Miami. It's been great. For you.
For you.
You can see the writing on the pavement. Young kids, they're growing up in basements. Online, a whole new generation. I'ma make mine, so you better go take it. Always, they need a new replacement. Decentralized, can't contain it. We're changing lives, yeah, upgrading. Call it suicide of the older generation. Too late to try to go contain it. A generation fueled by creation. We live lives on a small screen nation. We control the airwaves, no negotiation. I refuse to think we need saving. Something good will come from creation. And when we think that the world is too anxious, we'll adapt, evolve, survive, and save it.
What keeps you up at night, yeah? Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. What keeps you up at night, yeah? Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah.